Alrighty, what's up? My name is Jake. I'm an American from the United States, and I've been living down here in Colombia for about the past 4 or 5 months now, and I've been here kind of off and on for the past several years. And basically, I've been making videos recently about Colombia and also about ayahuasca, which is something that I think a lot of people recently have been having a lot of interest in, especially people that are living in places like the United States and Europe and kind of the Western countries. And there's a lot of interest surrounding it because it's not something that I think is very available in these countries, and also it's something that people do it for not just the experience of taking the drug, the medicine itself, but for the ceremonial aspect of it, which you can't really find in the United States as much. There's places that you can find it, and maybe I'll talk about that a little bit more one day, but the ceremonial aspect is something that differentiates ayahuasca from something like mushrooms and LSD and stuff that kids kind of just take out of rave, and I'm going to talk more about that. But in this video today, I kind of just want to share my thoughts really quickly on some of the downsides of ayahuasca that I think isn't always necessarily considered. And I think a lot of the downsides of ayahuasca can really be applied to just sort of psychedelics in general. And I just wanted to make a quick video because I just want to be consistent with uploading videos, and I'm going to be making a few kind of bigger project videos pretty soon because I just went to Putumayo, which is kind of the Colombian homeland for ayahuasca, and so I got a bunch of footage on my GoPro. So I'm going to that's going to take a while, but I want to make a quick video just sort of briefly sharing my thoughts on some things that I don't think is necessarily always considered with doing ayahuasca, with doing psychedelics, because recently with some of the past videos I've just had a couple people reach out to me, say, hey, where can I do ayahuasca, where do you go, where's the organization that you use? I'm going to be going to Colombia. And I think it's really cool that people are kind of, their interest and their fascination is piqued with it. But I think sometimes in the psychedelic ayahuasca community, there's a bit of a dogmatic attitude towards these things sometimes. I think that people that do these things maybe sometimes want to believe, whatever you want to call it, that these things are kind of universally good, not universally good, but that I think the downsides are often under emphasized, and I think the upsides are sometimes potentially overemphasized, and I think that overemphasization on the upsides can be a little bit risky to some people. And one thing I will say is, as far as like the risks, like what is the worst case scenario of doing these things, I honestly think that with things like mushrooms and LSD, this is just my opinion, I'm not a scientist, I haven't researched any of this, but I think that with things like mushrooms and LSD, I think there's a much greater risk of people maybe doing too much of them, doing them too often, doing them in the wrong way, maybe doing them in bad settings, and kind of being left with like a permanent sort of weirdness after the fact. Like the guy that did too much mushrooms or the guy that did too much acid. There's kind of that archetypal figure in the United States. As far as the things like ayahuasca, and in Colombia they call it yahe, I haven't really heard stories of anyone that has taken it and sort of lost their mind. I mean, you can maybe judge me. I've been doing it I've done it maybe, have done close to maybe 10 dozen, maybe less than that ceremonies so far. But as far as like how it affects you in your everyday waking life, I don't think that there's too much of a risk for some people that have maybe some predisposition towards mental illness. I think there's a possibility. But I think that the risks are more subtle. So I don't think that it's something that necessarily is going to cause you to go off the deep end and lose your mind and be kind of forever sort of weird afterwards. But I do think that it's something that takes a lot more work than maybe people want to expect. I think that a lot of people that are looking for ayahuasca, that are looking for yahe, that are looking for things like this, they're looking for it because of most people that are willing to go this far to be in like, South America, the jungle or wherever, that they're usually driven there by some sort of pain, something that they want to change, something that they want to alter. And I think that sometimes, and especially in the modern world, right, where everybody is depressed, everybody's sick, everybody's stressed, everybody's, I think there's this kind of general sickness of kind of the modern world that a lot of people live in, where they feel detached from nature, where they're maybe sitting down too long and they're just doing things that aren't really engaging or meaningful. And something like ayahuasca, where it's like, oh, you go down here and it's this experience of God, and people want to go there and say, I did it and I changed my life. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, is they're looking for a way to change their life. And there's this sort of I think it's a problem with the internet, maybe in general, with content, with social media in general, where we all kind of look online and we see like success stories or see this kind of, you know, people that are successful or people that we want to emulate or people that we follow or whatever. You know, we always like, we gravitate towards those stories where people say, you know, I just did this one thing and then everything changed at that point. You know, for some people, maybe they just have a moment. Some people, they just have a religious experience. Some people, they just realize something. And I think a lot of people that, particularly into psychedelics, every time you're doing it, there's maybe a small portion of you, sometimes, not with everybody. I think some people are more mature, but I think there's a small portion of a lot of people that do them where they're looking for that moment where from this moment forward and my life is forever going to be changed. And I've had a lot of those moments in ayahuasca, in psychedelics in general, but particularly so with ayahuasca, where I'm in the middle of it and you're so overwhelmed by this sometimes beautiful, sometimes horrible experience where you think, okay, at this moment forward, I'm forever going to be different. I'm going to, you know, I'm just going to make a right turn in life and just never look back. And from that point forward, everything is just going to be this and that. I'm going to do everything with love. I'm going to never do anything with malice or hate or this. And it's almost, maybe, I think there are people that does happen, people that maybe have drug addictions or whatever, where they're able to make a serious right turn in their life. But I think that story, that archetype of, I just did this thing and all of a sudden my entire life just by a snap of a finger changed. I think that's something that doesn't happen that often. And I think that it's something that if you have that in your head, you can maybe sort of cling to that idea and that will disappoint you. Now, I don't think it's impossible, but what I'm saying is that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you think that you're going to do ayahuasca or something like this, and that you're just going to forever from this point forward just be changed and never look back in the things in your life that you want to leave behind or move on from, then I think that's a risky expectation to have, because, I mean, expectations in general, but that's a risky expectation to have, because you could, then when you come back, and you always come back, you're not as far away from who you were before as you might think or you might hope. You're oftentimes a lot closer. And so if you start making the same mistakes, and this is something that I personally, being down here in Colombia, having done ayahuasca a lot more than I ever thought I would before I did it. You know, like I said, I did it about 3 times last month, so I've been doing this a lot, and I've kind of really been fascinated with this community. And if you go there and you think, I'm gonna forever change this, like you come back, like I said, you come back really close to who you were before. And when you start doing the things that you did before, the problem is because you've built up this expectation that now I'm going to be different, now I'm forever going to be changed. Then when you start doing the things that you were doing before, you'll start like getting like, man, like you'll get really kind of disgruntled. You'll get really kind of, I mean, what's the word? Kind of just, you know, disinflated, like let down. You'll feel let down. You'll think that, oh, well, what happened? I did ayahuasca. You know, I did this magical thing, and now I'm supposed to be changed. I had this meaningful experience, and you know, why am I doing the same things? And I think that can dishearten people. And if you get disheartened, then you could just kind of you could just keep making those mistakes. And then like that guilt kind of builds up, and then it's like, well, I keep making, then before you know it, you're right back to where you were before. Maybe even worse, because something about this experience, and this is the antidote, I think, to that, is that it requires a lot of work. And it's a lot of work that I think a lot of people don't realize. Doing ayahuasca, doing psychedelics, doing anything is not just going to magically make you better. I've met a lot of people down here even that do ayahuasca, do it regularly, and they still have a lot of issues. They still have a lot of things that they do that aren't maybe necessarily what you would expect. People that maybe still have problems with alcohol, people that still, you know, maybe have problems with, you know, diet or exercise or eating too much, or just, you know, just basic life things, or maybe they still, you know, get resentful or bitter, or, you know, they're not perfect people. Even the taitas, even the shamans, even those people, they're still human, and they still make a lot of mistakes. And what I think what these sort of experiences with psychedelics and all this stuff is, I think it's like throwing more fuel, you know, throwing more fuel into things. Like you have more energy, more life, meaning, or whatever, because it's an incredibly impactful experience. But if you don't find a way to direct that into a useful pattern, into a useful path, then it can really come back to hurt you, because it's like that energy, like that added energy that you get from such a powerful and overwhelming, meaningful experience like ayahuasca. Yeah, hey, is something that you, I think, this my theories, who am I, but you have to redirect that into something. You have to kind of be like on your heels almost. Like you have to not let yourself identify with the experience. You have to not let that energy go into thinking like I'm this, now I'm this kind of this great spiritual person or whatever, this or that, or now, man, I really figured all that out, because I did this thing. It's like you have to almost direct it towards like being very critical of yourself and making yourself very uncomfortable by being very, very, very honest with yourself. I think maybe for some people that are overly neurotic in their everyday waking lives and they have a problem with kind of beating themselves down too much, maybe for them they need to be built up and they don't maybe necessarily need to be as critical. But when you have this added energy of doing something like ayahuasca or any other psychedelics really, then you have to kind of like, you have to be, I think you have to be really on the ball with making sure that you're not like doing, because you're going to want to slip up, and you could maybe talk about the ego in this sort of way where it's like when you start making progress towards something, like there's going to be something that's going to want to be pulling you back, and it's very tricky because you can't really see it. And with ayahuasca, I think a lot of times it becomes this like it becomes this new like baptism for people, and I think that's what a lot of people are looking for. They want to be baptized. They want to have an experience that just, and it kind of is. It's the baptism in a lot of ways. You're going under the water, you're going into the unconscious, and you're having this encounter with God, and then you come out and you have this sort of this grace period where you feel kind of maybe added love, this kind of this glow period that comes after the experience. But the problem is identifying with that, saying that it becomes a part of you, saying that it makes you just a better person just by the nature of you having done it. The point that I'm going to get across in this video is that it takes a lot of work, I think, to really integrate it, because just talking from personal experience, I've made the mistake of going into these things and just looking for redemption, looking for a baptism, looking for just to be radically changed just from having these experiences, and not being, if I'm being honest with myself, being honest just in general, I don't think that growing up in the way that I did growing up as an American growing up in the West, I don't think that I have the same level of maturity with dealing with these things as some of the people that have maybe been down here for a long time, that have been in the ceremonies since their upbringing, that are from the jungle, that have, I don't think that I necessarily from the West have the same level of maturity to be able to handle that. And I think that sometimes that can cause you to kind of have these misguided beliefs after you have the experience. And I think that's just something that I wanted to make a quick video about, sort of talking about. I didn't really write any of this out or have a plan. I just wanted to give like my quick thoughts on this, and I think this is a perspective that I'm gonna, in various ways, try to maybe emphasize a little bit more on this channel, try to go into with a little more detail, maybe a little more examples. But like I said, I just went to Putumayo, got a bunch of footage. I'm gonna try to make a video on that, and I'm gonna just try putting a few videos together that I have in the works. But yeah, just want to make a quick video sharing that perspective. And thank you very much for watching. Leave a comment, any tips, and subscribe, hit the like, and Instagram, all that. Thank you very much. Bye.